So we hear this all the time, right? Terrorists on the internet. But what does that actually mean? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and go way beyond the headlines. We're diving into the digital playbook these organizations use, from the stuff they want you to see to the secret planning they absolutely don't.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start on the surface with their public megaphone. Then we'll go deeper, peeling back the layers to see how they recruit, how they talk in secret, how they move their money, and finally, what the future might hold in this digital cat-and-mouse game.
So first up, where does all this begin? Well, it begins right out in the open. You have to think of the public internet as their first battlefield. They operate kind of like these twisted marketing agencies, trying to build a brand and sell an ideology to anyone who's willing to listen.
You've seen the headlines. I've seen the headlines. You get this image of a tidal wave of terrorist websites completely flooding the internet. And yeah, the numbers sound big, they sound scary, but the reality of their digital footprint, it's a whole lot more nuanced than that. Okay, so let's put this in perspective. A few thousand websites might sound like a lot, but when you compare that to the billions of websites out there, it's a tiny drop in a massive ocean. What this tells us is that the real story isn't about quantity, it's about strategy. It's not about how many sites they have, but how they use them.
And this really gets to a huge dilemma they face. It's a trade-off. Do you go with a private online forum where you have total control, you can censor everything, but you're basically just preaching to the choir? Or do you jump into the wild, messy world of social media? You get massive reach, sure, but you lose all control. Suddenly you're dealing with trolls, impersonators, and even public arguments between your own members. It's control versus chaos.
So making that first contact is really just step one. After that, anyone who's interested gets pulled into a very systematic process. And this isn't random, it's not about luck. It's a carefully designed funnel built to filter out the merely curious and find the people who are truly committed.
And here's what that funnel actually looks like. It starts really wide, with propaganda videos on huge public sites. From there, if you show interest, you get invited to a private forum. But you're basically a junior member on probation. You're given little tasks to prove your loyalty. Only the ones who pass these tests move on to the next crucial stage, an actual, physical, face-to-face meeting. And if you get through that, then, and only then, are you brought into the real inner circle where the serious business happens.
All right, so you're in. You've made it to the inner circle. Now what? Well, the whole game flips. It's no longer about public propaganda. Now, it's all about total secrecy. So the big question becomes, how do you share your most sensitive plans without getting caught? For the longest time, a lot of people thought the answer was something straight out of a spy movie, steganography. The whole idea of hiding secret text messages inside a picture of a cat. And while it's technically possible, it was never really proven to be a widespread method. Plus, it has its downsides, like creating huge file sizes that are themselves pretty suspicious.
Turns out the reality was way simpler and kind of brilliant in a scary way. After the Madrid train bombings, investigators found this tactic. A group would use a single shared email account. But here's the trick. They'd write messages to each other and just save them in the drafts folder. No email was ever actually sent. That means there was no digital trail for surveillance to follow. It's basically a digital dead drop.
So because they didn't trust mainstream tools, they decided, hey, let's just build our own encryption software. The problem was, each time they tried, they created a tool with a massive, fatal flaw. Their first one, Mujahideen Secrets, was so obvious it basically painted a giant bullseye on anyone who used it. Then they made a plugin for chat apps, but it used public keys that pretty much announced to the world, hey, I'm using terrorist software. The latest version is so specific that simply having the program on your computer is a huge red flag.
Of course, none of this happens for free. You need money for operations, for recruitment, for everything. Which brings us to the next massive challenge for these groups. How in the world do you move money across the globe without setting off all the alarms in the global banking system?
And to give you a sense of the scale we are talking about, it is just staggering. A while back, a digital currency service called Liberty Reserve was shut down, and it was discovered that it had laundered $6 billion, with a B, and that wasn't just for terror groups, but for all kinds of criminals. It was a huge wake-up call that showed just how powerful these shadow financial networks had become.
And that, of course, brings us to cryptocurrency. It seems like the perfect solution, right? It's anonymous, it avoids banks, but it is absolutely a double-edged sword. Yes, you get some privacy, but, and this is a huge but, the blockchain is a public ledger. Every single transaction is recorded there forever.
All it takes is for authorities to link one of your digital wallets to your real identity, and they can potentially unravel your entire financial history. It's like pulling on a single thread that unravels the whole sweater.
Okay, so all of this brings us to our final section. What's next? We've seen how these groups operate now, but what does the future hold? Are we really on the brink of some kind of large-scale cyber terrorism?
When you hear the phrase cyber terrorism, your mind probably jumps straight to a Hollywood blockbuster. You know, hackers shutting down the power grid, crashing the stock market, all that stuff. But the real question is, could these groups actually pull something like that off?
Well, if you want to know what a top-tier cyber attack really looks like, the gold standard is the Stuxnet virus that targeted Iran's nuclear program. An analysis of that attack made it crystal clear. This wasn't something a small group could do. It took the resources of a nation-state. We're talking massive funding, insider knowledge, and teams of the best coders in the world. For now, that level of cyber warfare is pretty much out of reach for anyone but governments. But hey, the threat isn't just about these giant, world-ending scenarios. The real evolution is happening with much more accessible technology. You've got the darknet, using tools like Tor to create completely hidden websites for training and communication. You've got 3D printing, where someone can download a file and create untraceable weapon parts. And you can even take a normal piece of home electronics, like a network storage drive, and turn it into a private, encrypted server for a small cell to communicate completely off the grid. And that brings us to the final, really tough question. So many of these tools, strong encryption, anonymous networks, they were actually created for good reasons. They were built to help journalists and activists living under oppressive regimes. But here's the paradox at the heart of our digital age. In this constant arms race between privacy and surveillance, the very same tools that we build to protect the vulnerable can also be the perfect shield for the dangerous. And that's a problem with no easy answer.